So we are Northern Ireland's cybersecurity cluster. We're a cluster of companies based in Northern Ireland, developing world-leading cybersecurity technologies and services for customers worldwide. Northern Ireland is actually, cybersecurity in Northern Ireland is one of the fastest growing tech sectors, and our region is already gaining a global reputation. We've been privileged enough to have received a collaborative growth network status from Invest Northern Ireland, which means that we've been able to fund doing things like this and understanding the role of cybersecurity and where our cluster is going to go. So very grateful to all of those people. The prep for next week, which I know Denis is going to talk about later on as well. This is prep really for a CTF event that we're going to run next week, Capture the Flag event, which is going to involve you hopefully joining in, breaking stuff. You know, if you have ever had the privilege of breaking things in a nice, safe environment before, it's really good fun. I get to do it on a daily basis in my company, and I think Denis gets to do some work of it around it as well, depending on how many, you know, on what the day it is and what hat he's got on. But you know, we're gonna let you loose on a vulnerable web application. There will be prizes, which we're still working out what those prizes are actually going to be, but they will be, I'm assured, absolutely fabulous. And you know, we look forward to being able to give those out. There is a link out there which we will, I think Denis will put up at the end as well, for you to register your interest in this. What happens is that on Monday we're going to send out a link for you to register for your actual teams, and once we've got those up and running, then next Friday we will set up a Zoom call or a similar sort of event to this, but then we'll put you into breakout groups and you'll be able to go away and just break everything for a period of probably around about, I think, 2 hours we've specified, hour and a half to 2 hours, and then we'll do some demonstrations as well about some of the sillier ones that we find that are present within the vulnerable application, and then we'll you know, we'll assign the prizes out after that. Just a couple of thanks. I just want to firstly thank the team at Rapid7 and the organization Rapid7 for making Denis available, and for being so supportive of our local cluster. That's absolutely brilliant. I'd like to thank Gillian Colin O'Leary for pulling all this together, without whom this would be this would be not happening in any way, probably. And finally, just to Michelle and to Gary and the whole team of OWASP at the OWASP Belfast chapter, and we look forward to collaborating more with the team from there over the course of the next wee while as well. So handing over to Denis. Thank you, Denis, for agreeing to come and speak today. Denis is a senior application security specialist with Rapid7, and he's going to talk to us today about the OWASP Top 10 and why it's important in our world. So I'll hand over to you. I'm going to go on mute and to remove my camera now, and I'll see you all again at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Denis Podgurskiy, and as was mentioned, I'm application security specialist at Rapid7. Means I do work a lot with different web applications mostly. So I started in IT more than 20 years ago as a full stack developer, and I was working with different technologies like PHP, Java, C#, JavaScript. And 10 years ago, I joined a cybersecurity company, Anti-Objectives, and we were working on dynamic application security testing solution. So since that time, I learned a lot how to break things. I mean, if before I was learning how to build web applications, after I joined a cybersecurity company, I learned a lot how to break them. So let's take a look at let's take a look at our agenda first. And as you can see, we have only 3 items here, but you can trust me, the content is much more than just 3 items, because we are talking about OWASP Top 10. And let's start with the first guy. So OWASP Top 10, what does it mean and why it's important? But we need to understand that OWASP is open source community that actually everyone can contribute just to help make our world more secure, because it's quite important that developers and dev teams, security teams, they should understand how important security in our world. Our world is quite dynamic, and almost every business presented in the internet. It can be, web applications or different kinds of APIs just to interact with mobile applications or maybe IoT device. For example, I have a microwave at home, and I can send actually a comment from my smartphone when I return back at home. Okay, please cook me pizza, and that's great. But at the same time, it means that an attacker can get one more attack vector, and it can actually penetrate my house that I really don't like. So what we are talking about application security, and we definitely have some challenges here, and we are talking about 3 key problems. The first one is miscommunications between business teams, business departments, and different security teams. Second problem is talking about, we don't have money to buy proper product or take care about security. And the third one, we need to talk about application security skills, tools, or methods. And, if the first 2 problems is probably not something that we can handle, the third one is exactly, related to application security and how we can help with this one. So what may happen if you don't care about application security? Good example is here on this slide. At 2009, Visa and MasterCard informed Heartland payment systems that they can see some suspicious transactions from their end. And actually, the reason for this one is that because at 2008, SQL injection, SQL breach has been found on this Heartland payment system. And it looks like for almost 1 year, attackers were able to perform some transactions, and it means they just took some money. How it's happening? So let's take a look at our first guy from OWASP top 10, and here we are talking about injections. So injections can be quite different. We are talking firstly about SQL injections, where you can perform some attack against different types of database, MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Postgre, whatever. So another type of injections we can talk about LDAP, XPath, or as commanding, because in this case we can get access to local file system. And let's take a look at one of the examples in real time. Let's go to tempestfire.net. This is a vulnerable web application, and what we will try to do, we will try to perform some SQL injection here. So let's try to log in. Let's say we don't know password, but we can suggest that username is admin. In most cases, you can try to find admin, administrator, root, or tour as a username just to get administrative privileges. Okay, we were not able to do login, but let's take a look at our requests. And here we have really good post request to actually perform authentication. So what we will do here is just let's modify session ID first. And here we will try to do some SQL injection. Let's wait for a few seconds, and we should see a result here, and our SQL injection should be successfully executed. Few more seconds. Come on. Okay, as you can see right now, we bypassed authentication and we got administrative access. If you return back to the browser and just refresh it, you will see that we have access to administrative account. And due to the fact we successfully executed SQL injection, we actually can start talk about another problem. And another problem is broken authentication. So it means that in this particular case on tempestfire.net website is a really good example how you can execute a SQL injection and bypass authentication, because authentication is really important. User identity, account takeover, everything is quite complicated, but at the same time it's very important for every web application, because we need to identify a user in order to perform any transactions. And it means if you have broken authentication, when we can bypass by SQL injection, or we have a really weak passwords, or we do not prevent against brute forcing, or we use just HTTP instead of HTTPS, it means that there is a good chance for an attacker to execute man-in-the-middle attack and get your credentials. And after that, well, who knows what may happen. So that's a really good example, and actually it's happened just last year. As you can see, an email validation service apparently left database unprotected, and security research found it and communicated to the owner, and after that this website was taken offline. But I believe that 150 gigabyte of MongoDB database with a lot of records, it's quite critical. And there is a chance that we can start talk about our third guy, and we'll talk about sensitive data exposure. So every data is very, very important, especially when we are talking about finance, when we are talking about transactions, when we are talking about health records or any PII information, like username, passwords, email, addresses, everything is very, very important. And it means that application owner should take care about any sensitive data. It means that all sensitive data should be passed by using TLS protection. Means we should use proper HTTPS connection. We should use proper certificate, SSL certificate, in order to encrypt everything. And moreover, even if you put everything into the database, and if you use database encryption, there is a good chance that by executing SQL injection, we can get access to the database. And another good example, I mean, when we're talking about social network, like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, we always can, share our sensitive information. And take a look what's happened just 3 years ago with Twitter. An attacker got access to local system on one of the Twitter websites. And it means that we actually, under risk, all of us. And we can take a look at, by the way, I would recommend to use this port swagger.net security labs, because it's really good. Let's take a look at one of the vulnerable security labs, and we will take a look at our XSS external entities vulnerability, again from OWASP.10. So what we will see here we see just some kind of internet shop. Let's take a look, view details, and then here we just click this button, check stock. Then let's take a look at our network. And if you see this post request, that's actually XML payload here. Okay, let's copy this payload. And again, let's use this from extension just to see what we can do here. So this is our guy. Let's send it to request value. And if you use the same payload, if you send it, we will get back proper response. But what will happen if I start to modify this payload by adding something like doc type test entity XXA system file EDC password, and then we just need to modify product ID, and we are going to use here what okay. As you can see, we successfully executed this payload, and we actually got access to etc password file from the local system. So even, right now, I wouldn't say that I can see a lot of vulnerabilities like external entities. It's just probably because right now a lot of web applications migrating from using XML to just JSON. And in most cases, you will see that a lot of REST APIs will use JSON, and a lot of single page applications will be based on using JSON data instead of XML. But as you can see, it's still valid, and in a lot of cases, you will get a chance to work with the XML parser, and it means you always can try to execute this type of attack.
Dennis,
so,
it's you. Can I quickly interrupt? A couple of people are asking on the questions. What is the plugin, the Chrome extension that you're using?
Yeah, this is. Sorry, guys. This is my Chrome extension. I developed this for my purposes, to be honest, and well, it's actually can help you a lot with understanding what's going on with the web application, because in most cases, it will give you some understanding about technologies, about OWASP headers that are missing, and at the same time, request responses that you can use and send to request builder, and then modify and see whatever you need. You can find this Chrome extension in the Google Web Store, and at the end of this presentation, I just added this link. But you actually can go to Google Web Store and type something like penetration testing kit, and you will find this Chrome extension. Sorry, it's some kind of marketing, but I found just for my purposes, I found this it can help you a lot with debugging or sending some malicious requests to your web applications that you are going to penetrate actually. So returning back to our guys, you can see that we successfully performed XML external entities attack. So from this, we can go to the next problem, because from my understanding, even we were able to execute this external entity attack, but the problem is that if the web application or the server could disable doc type entity, we wouldn't be able to execute this payload. I mean, we are talking about our next problem. No authentication required or misconfiguration. And take a look at what's happened this year. 250 million records were exposed. And it's happened just because Elasticsearch accidentally has been moved to another security group. And actually, it was left without any authentication. An attacker just got access to this database, and even we are not talking about some serious impact like money or health records, but taking a look at these support cases and understanding what is the reason to create this support ticket, and what is the resolution, it's also quite sensitive information. And the problem is our next point: broken access control. I don't have any examples here, just because even if you take a look at our OWASP website, you will find that it is quite complicated for any automated solution to find what is the reason for broken access control. In most cases, you need to work with somebody, like penetration tester, because only human in this case probably will understand what is the problem and how it should be fixed. And broken access control is a really, close to security misconfiguration, and Microsoft case is exactly about this problem. Due to problem with a configuration on Elasticsearch, they lost a lot of data. And security misconfiguration, in most cases, it's even related. Okay, if you take a look at, for example, webscontest.com. Again, if you use this Chrome extension and if you take a look at OWASP headers, you will find that there are no required or recommended headers that actually can prevent a lot of stuff like XSS, for example. So another problem, this header. What is the reason to expose powered by header and tell an attacker that, yeah, we use PHP version 7 or PHP version 6, whatever. What is the reason to expose the information that we are working with Apache version 2 or any of them? And moreover, if you take a look at these technologies, okay, we know exactly that right now our application is running on Apache 2.4.7. It means we can just go to CWE database and take a look. Oh, listen, it seems that there are some known vulnerabilities that we actually can try to execute on this particular server. So it's another problem that we need to take care about, and any web application, any web server should take care about protection and do not expose really sensitive information. So let's go to the next. And again, it's just happened last year. The problem with this one is not particularly related to just XSS, because actually there were multiple vulnerabilities that allowed an attacker to put stored XSS into the database. And after that, all end users were under a risk. So if you are talking about XSS, it's still an injection, but the problem with this type of injection is that it's related mostly to end users, not to application owner. Because when we are talking about OS command injection or SQL injection, it means that the application itself is under risk. It means an attacker can get access to the database or file system, local file system, whatever. But when we are talking about XSS, it means that every end user, when he opens this web application, will be under risk. And we have an example on Hackathon, webscontest.com. It's another vulnerable web application. And actually, let's just try to find something. So the first one, we tried to execute some search. And if you take a look in our title, we actually can see what we sent, payload. So I would definitely, in this case, I would try something like alert, oops, script, alert, document, okay. Okay. So it means that this particular application, yeah, I do understand it has been created exactly with this purpose, but every time when you see such behavior, I mean, when you send something and you can see it's reflected somewhere, you probably would want to try, listen, maybe there is a chance to execute XSS. And in our case, yeah, it does work. So here we are talking about XSS, and we can talk about different type of cross-site scripting. The first one, as we displayed, it will be reflected. It means when we send some data, it just will be displayed right after that. Another problem with a stored XSS, and our previous example about this world game, it's exactly related to this particular case when we are talking about stored XSS, because in that particular case, an attacker actually was able to inject this particular XSS into the database, and after that, it was displayed on the web application. And it means every end user was under risk, and some of them lost money or some stuff within the game. I'm not a gamer, to be honest, but I can understand how important it can be for some of the gamers. My stuff, where is it? It's just has been stolen. And then we can talk about our next problem, like insecure deserialization. Again, unfortunately, I don't have really good example on this particular case, but you need to understand that a lot of different languages, like Java, for example, it will use Java object model, and it means it will serialize all the input, and then it will send everything to the server. What will happen if an attacker will recognize this, Java object model and will try to modify it somehow? And it means that when we send it to the server, it will be deserialized. And there is a huge chance that you can use this attack vector to actually perform different types of attacks. I see one more question. maybe. Yep. Okay. And let's talk about A9, using components with known vulnerabilities. If you remember, yeah, when we opened this one, this guy, and we just went to CW database. So you can find a lot of different databases that actually can help you to understand what type of different libraries or software actually vulnerable for different payloads. So it means that when you check different web applications, and if you see jQuery version 3 or version 2, whatever, you always can go to CVE database and just try to check, okay, I have this particular JavaScript library, or I have this particular Nginx server. Can you give me some information? Is there a chance I can find some kind of exploit that I actually can try to execute against this particular web server or web application? And it means that, yeah, they definitely need to think about working with known vulnerabilities. In most cases, it's related to open source, and you can find a lot of really good solutions on the market that may help you a lot with securing your open source libraries. It means that they will analyze what they have, and they will recommend you, okay, this particular library should be updated to the latest version just because of security vulnerability that already known. And this is something that we definitely need to take care about. And finally, we need to talk about the last item, A10. And here we are talking about insufficient logging and monitoring. So as you can see, this particular item has been added into OWASP Top 10 based on industry survey. It means that OWASP sent a lot of questions to different practitioners, security practitioners, with the question, guys, what do you think about web application security in general? And one of the item highlighted, it was exactly insufficient logging and monitoring. Why it's important? When you have your logging and monitoring in place, it means that you will see everything in real time. And it means that when an attacker started to perform different suspicious actions, you will be notified about this one. And it means you have time to react. And it means you can, disable this IP address or prevent any other types of attacks. So all this, from my understanding, all this OWASP Top 10 issues, they're quite close to each other. If you take a look, security misconfiguration can create a problem and grant access to an attacker to the database. And after executing SQL injection, an attacker will get access to sensitive information. And we are talking about all this OWASP Top 10, quite related to each other items. Means one more time, we need to understand that web application security is quite complicated because every web application is unique. We are not talking about, some well-known systems like Joomla or WordPress. Even for them, you can find a lot of already existing known vulnerabilities. But every time when we work with a web application, we need to understand that this is something unique we don't know. And when we analyze it, we need to try to find some different breaches within this web application. So yeah, conclusion for this OWASP Top 10. Applications are very important for all businesses, and especially during this time, with all this pandemic, coronavirus, a lot of businesses, they have to go online. If before they were like, we probably would want to go online and do something. Right now, a lot of businesses just have to do that. I mean, open internet shops or delivery or your mobile bank, everything, everything in the internet, everything in based on web applications, IoT devices, more and more IoT devices you can find at your home. Even, you can buy something for your kids, some toys, and these toys can be connected to the internet. But what does it mean? it means that you're probably under risk, because if something has been identified on the cloud, after that, you're home at risk, because an attacker can actually modify cloud infrastructure, and you will get an enemy within your house. And it means we need to think about application security from different points of view. Like, let's help our customers, our world, to reduce risk. Every time when you work with web application, you need to think about reducing risk for your end users and for your application owner. Protect brand, it's also very important, because I really don't think that, for example, Sony company, when I joined NT Objectives 2013, Sony company has been hacked. And this hack happened exactly through web application. An attacker got access to a lot of records related to financial transactions, username and passwords, and email addresses. And we performed a lot of scans just to help Sony company, solve their problem with different web applications. So brand is very important for every application owner, for every business. And we even cannot, figure out what is the impact, how much cost it will be, because it's quite complicated to estimate any brand, and any impact for the brand. Honda company, today I read on the LinkedIn that Honda, as far as I remember, Honda, they have to stop their business just because of problem with some malware within their network. So it's again, not only brand image, but an impact for real factory. Customer confidence matter, of course, if your user, I mean, let's say you are a business owner, you have your web application, and your end users under impact, with XSS or SQL injection, and it means that they're under risk to get their money stolen. It's something that we definitely need to pay attention to and take care about this one. And improve trust from customers, investors, and lenders. Definitely, this is something that we need to care about, and we need to take a look every time when we work with web applications. So, guys, it seems I was a little bit fast, but you can see that here we can talk about some takeaways from this presentation. The first one, I would definitely recommend you to take a look at all these vulnerable websites like demtestfire.net, Hackathon, Devs Contest, and moreover, security labs. I found, thanks Michelle, because she shared with me this security lab, and I found it's amazing. I mean, you can get access to portswagger.net, without any problem. And after that, you can actually start doing a lot of penetration testing, but just for fun. Or maybe you need to train, you want to train, or maybe you want to be a penetration tester, or just improve your skills in this one. And the last one is penetration testing kit Chrome extension. I can't actually recommend it because I'm a creator of this one, but if you find this useful, wasn't happy to get your feedback, and because I'm going to continue developing this one. And there are a lot of ideas what you can actually do with Chrome extension, just because it has access exactly to Chrome browser, and it means you can get easy visibility on everything what's going on within the application. And yeah, that's the last slide of this presentation. And as you can see, on June 19th, we have captured the flag game. And you are very welcome to join us on this Capture the Flag game event next Friday. And I believe that right now we can start with questions and answers session. Simon?
So thank you very much, Denis. That was absolutely brilliant. Really appreciate you you sharing your expertise like that. We have the brilliant Michelle Simpson joining us now. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Oh, I think we might. I'm afraid I can't hear you there, Michelle.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hello there. We can hear you now.
Hi, Simon. How are you?
So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. Michelle is the chapter leader for OWASP Belfast. I'll hand you over to yourself for a bit of an introduction.
Hi guys. First of all, thank you so much to Simon and NI Cyber and Gillian for having us, involving us in this. Thanks, Denis. That was an absolutely fantastic presentation, really interesting, really good content. And thank you to everybody for coming, really. So the OWASP Top 10 was first published in 2003, and it gets updated every 3 or 4 years. It's really useful for businesses to kind of gauge where they are in terms of the most popular security risks out there. The resources that Denis had on his last slide are really, really helpful. So we're going to go and start with some questions. We have a question from Donald Campbell. Hi Denis, great presentation. Nice to see some demonstrations. Are web applications the main attack surface as opposed to network attacks, for example?
Okay, yeah, that's a difference between network attack and web application, because when we are talking about attacking web application, in most cases we will work, through HTTPS protocol. And if you are talking about network layer attack, it's a little bit different, because in this case, when we perform network attacks, we will work with physical assets in most cases. We will try to find different ports and probably execute different payloads, but it will be on, I would say, low layer. You know what I mean? It's just, okay, let's try to use Telnet, for example. Let's try to connect to this port just to see if it's open. And if it's open, let's try to execute some payload. With web application, it's a little bit different, because everything in the internet, and in most cases, it will be accessible to everyone. And yeah, you will need to know a little bit about, for example, how to perform SQL injection attack. It means you need to understand, in your mind, it should be, okay, I see that if I send single quote, I got just, SQL error. Okay, I see now, let's try to build this SQL query. Actually, let's try to break it, insert something within this, and then execute. And it's quite, sometimes it can be quite complicated. I remember when we participated on PCI scan, one of the PCI scans, it was a really interesting SQL injection with just modifying user ID, and after that, I mean, in the URL, but after that, we actually got access to admin with admin privileges. So I would say that web application attacks and network, they're a little bit different. That's why you can see a lot of, for example, vulnerability management or Nexpos, if you are talking about Rapid7 products, that will help you to attack on network layer, and at the same time, you can find a lot of dynamic application security testing solutions that will help you to identify risks on web applications.
Super. And a question from Brian Hamill. What are the risks of XSS? How does it go from an alert to being a security risk? I believe, Simon, do you have a demonstration for this?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yes, I actually do just have a very brief demonstration set up using a tool called Beef, just to demonstrate the difference. But the exploit of XSS and some of the interesting bits and pieces that can go through. I think I might need presentation privileges. There we go. Thank you very much, Gillian. So let me just check I'm sharing the right screen, otherwise I'll get myself in trouble. So I have 2 VMs that I just set up just to demonstrate this. The first one is yeah, there we go, get myself in trouble already. The first one is a vulnerable web application just called DVWA, which is an old PHP based web application. And what I'm just going to demonstrate in here is the signing of a guest book. If anyone still remembers what guest books are, they were things from the early days of the internet that Denis and I would probably be more familiar with. Hi, love your site, etc. But just as a useful demonstration. So what I'm doing here is I'm injecting some JavaScript into this guest book. I'm going to hit sign guest book, okay, and then I'm going to go back over to my Kali machine, my Kali Linux machine here, which is over on this side over here. And what I should see any second now is this machine becoming active again. There we go. So what I can now see, this is a completely separate virtual machine running in a separate instance. What we can now see is the full infrastructure from within the browser. So we've access to all the useful information from within there. But we can also do some really interesting stuff within this. The ones that I like to, I think are really interesting are things like this pretty theft. So if I execute this on my Kali browser and I hit execute, then when I go back to my window, my web application, I now have Facebook login open in front of me. So I can now do simon@test.com with the password in there. Think I'm logging into what is ostensibly Facebook, and then the output of that comes back in my Kali Linux machine there. And there's a good few examples of those. I mean, if you go into that and then you can execute that with a YouTube login or something like that. So if we go back to here, there we go, you get a YouTube one, and you can modify that. So you get really nice ways of being able to interact with the user's browser and mess around with it. There's also things like, we know it's Firefox, so therefore let's execute a notification bar, and if we go back to our Firefox, we can see that this pops up over the top telling us an additional plugin is needed, which is obviously a really interesting way to be able to modify to mess around with the user's application and their web application. There's some interesting stuff. We once did a demo where we were working with a client and discovered some XSS, and they said, well, why is that a problem? And one of the reasons we found it to be a problem, well, we started playing the A-Team music down their browser to them through one of these plugins here, just to demonstrate the control that you have over somebody's computer. There are ways in which you can do webcams and all that sort of stuff as well. So Brian, I hope that answers your question about kind of when does it go from just being an alert pop-up box with lols, you has been hacksawed or something like that, into an exploit, just using tools like that.
And Simon, what experience is required for the CTF next week?
So what we're interested in doing is trying to help as many people onto this as we possibly can. So if you are have done some development, if you have a technical piece, any bits of technical knowledge, then come along. We're not after, this isn't going to be about the from a very, very high level. This is about teaching, it's about learning, it's about sharing experiences. So what you will find is that we will have mentors who will be popping into each breakout room as and when they happen, and giving advice. They may well even be bribable. I don't know what these people are like, but it's about everybody joining in, learning and having some fun. So if you think it's something that you'd like to do, then please come along. We'd love to have you involved.
Maybe for you, Denis, what course would be good to learn Active Directory attacks?
About what type of attacks? Sorry.
Active Directory.
Oh, WAF injection. Well, you definitely will need to have something to be, some kind of Active Directory. Last time I used, it was some Active Directory Forest, or I even don't remember, but well, how it will work? It means when you try to log in into using Active Directory, you can try to execute different type of attacks and actually do LDAP injection. Active Directory or LDAP injection, it will be related to the server that actually should perform authentication when you type something. And it means different types of attack, like again, single quote, as far as I remember, or some backslashes that you can send to the server with Active Directory in order to bypass authentication and I'll actually get some information from Active Directory.
Thank you. Are there any recommended tools on automating the test of XSS vulnerabilities?
Oh, which one? Sorry, again.
XSS. Any
XSS.
recommended tools for automating XSS testing?
Any recommended tools for testing XSS? Well, I believe that there are a lot of dynamic application security testing solution, because actually XSS, it's quite simple in most cases to identify using any of dynamic application security testing solution. You can probably use even Burp to get this result. In most cases, I use Burp when I need to go really deep, and just because browsers quite often they will prevent XSS from execution, and this is really not the best way to use your browser. Firefox is good for this one because you can use Firefox to see what's going on, but Chrome definitely will prevent it. So it means when I need to perform XSS stack, I would probably use Burp or Firefox. Automation is quite complicated. You can find a lot of open source tools just to help you identify XSS vulnerabilities. At Rapid7, we have our DAST solution that actually works very well with different types of XSS vulnerabilities, like stored, reflected, or even out-of-bound XSS injections, like Simon demonstrated. So it really depends what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve. If you want to just learn, it's probably good to start with open source tools. If you need to take care about real applications, it's probably good to start thinking about some, dynamic application security tests solutions that will be supported and provided by different companies, like Rapid7.
Thank you. There's a comment from Colin Manson. I'd recommend looking at the Cyber Mentors course on Udemy? Very good for AD attacks. Thank you, Colin.
A lot of different courses.
So another question: since the OWASP top 10 is updated so rarely, are there any other lists that update more frequently, and is there any need? I'm not personally aware of any other lists. Are either of you guys?
Nope.
Yeah, I've come across the CWE, Common Weakness Enumeration, cwe.mitre.org, which is it's very useful. But what I would say is that there's a lot of stuff in it. It's big. There are examples for API. It starts with API and function errors, ends with user session errors, and there's, I don't know, 20, 30 different sections with subsections in between. Again, maybe if I just share my, maybe I've removed that before I shared my screen, but never mind. This is the CWE .mitre.org. In here, there's software development, hardware design, and research concepts, and in the software development, common weakness enumeration. There's just one of the reasons why I think the top 10 is so useful is it helps you to focus your mind a little bit. Yes, it might not have everything, and yes, it might not be perfect, but what it does do is it gives us something to work from. When we're running we're talking about threat modeling, and we use OWASP top 10 to help us to focus our mind on exploits that might come in, because you cannot, what's that old adage? If you protect everything, you protect nothing. So you've got to kind of help ourselves to limit. And I think that this is a useful list. The cwe.mitre.org is a useful list, but it is a big old beast of a thing. That's why I like the top 10 as a way of approaching that. And also, as Donal has just pointed out as well, there's a SANS list as well, which can be very, very useful to refer back to. At the end of the day, I think this comes down to experience, and maybe I'll ask Denis for his experiences as well. But at the end of the day, I think this comes down to experience and knowing. I know when our testers take a look at stuff, you can really start to you can start to know things from the way the application at the very beginning of the testing. You can really start to identify things very early. So I think it's about experience and humans identifying things.
Thanks, Simon. So there's a question: will OWASP ever introduce certification for web application pen testing? I appreciate that I am the OWASP representative here. I may not have the full information just to hand, but I don't believe so. I'm not aware of any plans to do that. I can't see it happening. However, that's not to say it won't. There's opportunities for people to create new projects all the time in OWASP. So I don't know if there's anything preventing anyone from starting something like that. I like this question. What is your favorite JavaScript event handler? Denis?
JavaScript event handler? Can I ask a little bit more details?
Like on mouse over or on click?
You know what? Again, if you return back to the Chrome extension I demonstrated, I spent almost 2 years and I found a lot of really interesting things related to JavaScript handling. And it's really, really interesting because, for example, when you use some click event, it's very good stuff with bubbles true or not. Because if you use bubbles through, it means that event will be, propagated to the top. Sometimes you don't need it, sometimes you need it. Moreover, I found a lot of events that you need to think about when you work with modern single-page applications like React. If you take a look at React.js framework, you will find that they actually create virtual DOM and they handle everything in their virtual DOM. So you need to understand how does it work. Same for Angular, because there are two really brilliant frameworks, Angular and React. But what they do with JavaScript, it's, it will break your mind seriously. And I found that you will need to understand that not only click, but you will need to care about events like resize, for example. It's for single-page application frameworks. And again, if you take a look at this Chrome extension, you will find that you actually can record a macro and then export it using JavaScript. If you do that, you will find, a piece of code that actually handles all the required events, like resize, input, mouse down, click, all these events quite related to each other. And it really depends on the application and what you want to achieve. JavaScript is amazing.
Thank you. Question from David Cochrane. How does the SANS top 25 software errors compare with the OWASP top 10? So I'm not familiar with the SANS top 25 software errors. Are either of you to answer that?
Well, it's probably good to go to even, start with OWASP, I believe, because on OWASP website, you can find like Zap proxy. Yeah, correct. That may help you a lot with understanding, or even Perl. All these tools, it really depends what you want to achieve. If you want just learn and be a penetration tester, you probably would want to start with Zap proxy, Perl proxy, or any other types of proxy like Fiddler, just to see what's going on with your request and response, and just get a chance to modify your request and then execute it. If you're talking about automation, you probably need to take a look at different subset of softwares that may help you with automating your security in application. But I don't want to provide any answer like, oh yeah, you need to take a look at this particular software, because matter of course I will talk about Rapid7.
And if I just jump in on that as well, I think the CWE and SANS lists, they're not the same, but sorry, I think they might actually even be the same. But anyway, what they do, the way that SANS list was created was that it was taken from the from lists of CVEs, and that were the one for 2019, for instance, was pulled together from analyzing high-scoring vulnerabilities reported in the NVD, in NIST's NVD. So that means that these tend to be kind of new issues, if you see what I mean. The OWASP top 10 is about describing types of issues, okay, and I think that's where the difference comes in. So the OWASP top 10, what we're always looking for in the top 10 is that SQL injection seems to, despite it being 2020, we're still seeing it in some applications. We find it fairly frequently, I'm afraid to say. the top one in the SANS list is around improper restriction of operations within the bounds of a memory buffer, and obviously I'm just quoting that off the top of my head, but that comes from buffer overflows and kind of looking at applications and specific programs and things like that. Whereas what the OWASP top 10 does is it's describing categories of issues as opposed to anything else. And I think that's really valuable because it shows developers and testers what they should be looking for. And I think that's so important for people to be aware of. From a question and answer point of view, and from today's webinar, as chair, I think we probably do have to call it a day there. We're approaching 2 o'clock. People probably have various bits and pieces to get onto, any stand-ups to get to, or anything like that to close the day off. From my point of view, I just want to thank Denis for his brilliant presentation today and for being so open and sharing all of his thoughts and experiences. I really appreciate it, and all of us at NI Cyber really appreciate people coming forwards like this. From our part of NI Cyber as well, thank you to Michelle for coming along and making yourself available, and representing OWASP so well in Northern Ireland and in Belfast particularly. We're as a cluster, we hope to work together with organisations like OWASP much more frequently over the course of the next wee while. So thank you very much. Although you can't see her, Gillian Colin O'Leary is running in the background here, and we are all very grateful to her for keeping us right, keeping us on track, keeping us through all the bits and pieces. So thank you to Gillian. Gillian, you're gonna be irritated with me, but I can't remember what our next webinar is, but I do know we have one planned, and please join our LinkedIn group, and join our and keep an eye out there for details of our next webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again very soon. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.